contributions and I think for the most part broad support for the proposed changes, and again to thank them for their assistance in bringing it forward. Maybe just to touch on the bill itself, and then if you'll allow me some latitude just to respond to maybe some of the other issues that were raised. The bill itself, I mean, it is very clear. We need to make sure that there is equity if a crime, and nobody is disputing the fact that murder is the most serious crime irrespective of who commits it, but if it is committed by a child who then happens to age out by the time of sentencing, there has to be equity, and at the moment that currently doesn't exist, as clearly set out by the High Court judgment. This will amend that, I believe, and make sure that that equity exists. In relation to your proposed amendment, Deputy, I will absolutely commit to engaging with my colleagues and the team on that. My understanding, though, is while the 2001 Children's Act does have statutory sentences for certain crimes, there isn't one specific for a murder committed by a child. So that does absolutely, but murder only applies the mandatory murder because we're disapplying it. It means that you're reverting back to the common law. There is no sentence for a child who commits murder if we're separating the two. But again, I absolutely commit to engaging with my team on that and trying to get absolute clarity before we speak again tomorrow on it. More broadly, I mean, the best thing that we can do here for a young person is making sure that they get the best start in life, and that where there are challenges in their life or as they go through school or within their communities, that we provide the support, but also that there are deterrents to engaging with criminal activity or behaviour. And to that effect, I believe this government has actually done a huge amount in relation to that. We have invested significant money in our youth justice strategy, which was initiated by my colleague David Staunton. Previously in the department has been worked through by Minister Brown and myself. That funding in itself is not just going into youth diversion programmes, but it's looking at how we can expand those programmes, making sure they're situated right across the country, but looking at even younger cohorts of people. It's very clear that there are children who are 6, 7, 8, 9 who are being brought into a life of crime, who are engaged in antisocial behaviour and then potentially moving on to criminal activity. And so that funding is now looking at how can we be more focused, more targeted, and how can we have an even spread across the country. Specifically then linked in with that is our Green 10 project, and while we don't talk about it enough, because I suppose it is quite the work is being done in certain areas without highlighting where they are. There are 1,000 children that are benefiting from this intense intervention, where we have in Garda Síochána working closely with local services, but in particular with the families and communities that these young people are in, understanding and acknowledging that many of the challenges may start within the home or within the community, and how do we address them and how do we support them. And if those programmes could be rolled out, the Green 10 project itself has been expanded, but if we can roll that out across the country, obviously using those intensive ways in which we're working with young people, that in itself I believe will hugely be beneficial. The legislation that I enacted recently acknowledges the harm that is inflicted on young people where they are coerced into a life of crime. 5 years was chosen because of the fact that for a lot of these children as well, it is a family member or potentially a parent or somebody within their inner circle. That sentence can be applied on top of the sentence for the crime itself that has been committed. So it's not just the 5 years potentially, it's the crime itself as well. And to take that person out of the child's life could potentially be more harmful. So it's not to negate the crime or the seriousness of it. The fact that we now have a law that says if you coerce a child separate to the offence itself into crime or a life of crime, there's going to be a significant sentence. And it's to try and get that balance and make sure that we can support the child itself and the setting that they're in and the broader support that needs to be provided. We talk about crime, we talk about work that's been done to try and dismantle these groups that are enticing so many young children. There's a huge amount of investments gone into An Garda Síochána. We can only see the work in the last week alone, what they are doing to dismantle these organised crime groups. And my role is to make sure they have the resources, the funding, but also the laws to do that. I've increased the conspiracy to murder sentence, again acknowledging and recognising that it's not often the person who makes the decision that pulls the trigger, but they're equally as detrimental and cause as much misery in communities as those who are working on the ground as well. Separate to that then, the criminal justice system. So you might say that some of the problems arise here because the system is too slow. Everything that I'm doing when it comes to our courts is to make sure we have a quicker, more efficient and easily accessible system. That's why I've appointed 30 new judges in the last 2 years alone, and that's why I'll add an additional 20 in the years ahead. If we look at the other jurisdictions in the UK, has been references to how they can have quicker sentencing. Evidence is a huge amount to do with that. That's why body cameras are absolutely essential for Gardaí. We've seen in the UK where evidence can be not just gotten quickly, but also through CCTV and the use of of FRT and AI, they've been able to use that evidence to ensure guilty pleas, making sure we have quicker sentences. So everything that I'm doing to make sure we have body cameras on Gardaí, which has already started, that we have FRT and that Gardaí have access to that evidence, coupled with the investment in judges, their support staff and our courts and their modernisation, is the only way that we can actually get to a system that is efficient and effective for everybody. Finally, people have mentioned protecting our Gardaí. Yes, we need to make sure we have more Gardaí. Yes, I'm doing everything that I can to increase those numbers and to keep the Gardaí that we have. But again, I will point to the body cameras and the effect that they are already having. I have spoken to Gardaí on the ground who have very clearly said that because of the body-worn cameras, they have been in situations where they have de-escalated the situation, where they have felt safer. And in fact, the very first conviction has taken place in our courts where body camera evidence was used and was able to show the aggression that was pointed towards the Garda member, and that person received a 3-month sentence, which they probably wouldn't have received otherwise. So there's a huge amount is being invested into our criminal justice system, into An Garda Síochána, into protecting younger people. But this bill in itself is very clear. We need to make sure that there is equality between children and those then who are aged out when it comes to sentencing for a conviction of murder. I believe that this will change it. I will absolutely come back to the Deputy on the point that you've raised, and we'll be able to engage in it tomorrow again. Thank you.